The bandwidth for this episode of the AR-15 podcast is sponsored by the Firearms Radio Network. FirearmsRadio.tv.
Welcome to the AR-15 podcast. This is the podcast about your favorite black rifle. This show is for you. Whether you're building your first AR or you've been building ARs for years, there is something we can all do to take our black rifle to the next level.
You make this show possible by clicking through our Brownells and Amazon affiliate links. The next time you order online, go to ar15podcast.com and click through our Brownells and Amazon affiliate links. It doesn't cost you anything extra, and a small portion of your sale goes to supporting pro-gun radio like the AR-15 podcast. Support the Firearms Network as a whole by pledging your support at patreon.com/FRN.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. We are up to episode number 139, fast approaching 3 years of podcast episodes, so we're pretty excited about that. Tonight I'm going to be doing a solo show, and I thought I'd talk about a project build that we've had underway here, and let you know what we've been thinking about when we've been putting together the SBR that's part of this project. So we'll get through that topic tonight, and before we do, I wanted to remind you all that we have been made aware of a new source of cool products. It's a company that's doing patches and stickers, and we have a lot of FRN talent on there. The website is patriotpatch.co, and if you get over there, you'll find you have an opportunity to pre-order a really fine-looking huckleberry patch. You'll just have to go see it and take my word for it. So we also want to let you know that the Firearms Radio Network is going to be at the 2015 Bullpup Shoot in Mount Carroll, Illinois. The shoot's going to go on September 19th, and so we have just a few more days before we get there, and I want to encourage you all to go ahead and get yourself up and outdoors and attend the shoot. If you'd like to get more info, you can go to bullpupshoot.com. Bullpup Shoot is all one word. So go out there and visit the guys and say hi. So with that, why don't we go ahead and turn our attention to the main topic. So over the course of, I would say, it's probably been 12 months, I have been toying with the idea of getting an SBR. It would be the second SBR that I have. I had some pretty specific requirements for the build, and so I went ahead and pulled the trigger. I guess that would be probably right after shot, after my busy season, so somewhere in May of this year. So, that kind of brings me through the first consideration, which would be, what are the thoughts one must undertake, think about, and consider when they're trying to go through the NFA process. So let me tell you a little bit about my experience. I have a trust, and I don't know if all of you listeners now are going to be aware of my thoughts, but I'm a practicing attorney, and I really do think it's wise to find counsel who's going to be able to talk to you about what goes on with a trust that is supposed to hold an NFA item. There's some pretty specific considerations that really don't ever get drafted into a trust when you use the cookie cutter trusts. And I'm not talking about the new products that have been coming on with a lot of the more, I guess, directed and focused NFA manufacturers, NFA item manufacturers. Silencer Co's a company who's just come out with a trust. But, if you're going to get some, cookie cutter software store boxed trust software, it's not going to come close to being able to do what an NFA trust needs to do. If you buy some product from a company who is specifically advertising it as an NFA trust, if they don't practice law, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that they're selling you something that does what it says it does, but they at least are representing to you that their trust is a trust thought about and drawn up in light of a higher order of thinking. Mainly, what are the considerations that the National Firearms Act is going to bring to bear when we're talking about a trust created to hold those items. And so you can see kind of my thinking here that while they may be good products, you're not going to get legal counsel because they don't have the ability to counsel you like a lawyer. And to the degree that you can find a lawyer that will be able to, hold your hand through this and explain things and let you know how it all works, that's great. But, my practical experience is this. If I am going to be at risk for any advice I give to somebody, I'm interested in making sure that I control all aspects of the product that I'm delivering. I can miss something in somebody else's product and, I'm kind of on the line and it's nobody's fault but my own. Whereas if I create some trust, I can be sure to the degree of my own professional competence that it is a good product. So I would encourage you to go to a lawyer, but it's not mandatory. Like I said, there are plenty of companies out there who are advertising and selling what they have apparently come by as quality NFA trusts. But the trust as the mechanism for getting and holding an NFA item is right now, in this moment, probably the most convenient, hassle-free, and I would say timely mechanism for having NFA items transferred into your name. So as far as the National Firearms Act, the trust avoids the administrative overhead that a corporation provides, and it avoids the possibility that in conferring with local law enforcement, you're not going to get their cooperation like an individual must get. So the trust, as a balance of the two other mechanisms, really kind of takes a middle ground that has kind of a having your cake and eating it too approach to the whole idea of having something to hold that NFA item in. I think when a lot of people think about the National Firearms Act, they're pretty intimidated. When they think about the process of owning something like a silencer, an SBR, an SBS, they really are wary of what it is they're doing. And I think that there is a lot of anxiety that is unnecessary. When it comes down to it, the whole mechanism is strictly one of ensuring that you're jumping through the right hoops and that you are going to be taxed the way the law requires you to be taxed. So, in as much as the application process is assisted by having a trust, the process itself is right now very well understood by the vendors who conduct the business of selling those items you might put in that trust. And the ATF really does have a quality electronic application system for making application for some of these things. So let's start off with the idea of going through a vendor. if you were to go through a vendor, most companies are going to really hold your hand. They have the appropriate occupational tax stamps, tax certificates, whatever they are. They also have the appropriate ATF licensing in place. And, you know, their business is dealing with something that's very tightly regulated. So most of these individuals are going to do their utmost to comply with the law and make sure they're doing everything right. And I think that most of us would admit that you can walk into, you know, a shady store and a store that's, you know, playing everything by the book, and we have a real sense of, you know, which one is which. And so I don't think that any of us are surprised that, you know, a shady store is up to no good or not taking care of their business. But, you know, if you find yourself in a place you're not comfortable with, go to a place you are. You know, be an informed consumer and make sure that you know that you can trust and rely on the people that you're dealing with. But going to your local gun store who has experience in NFA items is a great way to get started. In terms of the SBR, it is either something that you're going to buy from another manufacturer, so it is transferred into your trust in much the same way that a silencer would be, or it's something that you buy that was not an SBR when you bought it, but you make application to make it an SBR, which is essentially your designation to the ATF that you have this lower receiver, you want to put a short barrel on it, and as such, you are willing to engrave the requisite marks on that lower. So those two processes, as handled through your local gun store, are likely to be a paper application through their tried and true systems. I've dealt with 3 different companies. They all did a really great job, and, you know, up to date, I have absolutely no complaints about those people that kind of step into this arena. As far as the prospect of basically the build your own SBR, the process for doing that is going to use a different form. If a manufacturer makes an SBR and you buy it from them and they transfer it into your name, they're going to use a Form 4. It would be the same as if it were a silencer. And if you are going to manufacture it yourself, you use a Form 1. And the Form 1 is basically just a declaration to the ATF that you are going to undertake this manufacturing process. It's not so much manufacturing as it is repurposing something manufactured and marking with the appropriate marks. So in doing it electronically, you have the potential to really shorten the process a little bit, and in some cases a great deal. But you have to understand that that is really not anything you can control. It is still a bureaucracy, and you're at the mercy of those people who are taking care of their business. When we talk about an electronic application, what we're talking about is logging on to the ATF's website, getting a user ID, going through the vetting process, getting the details into the hands of the ATF so that you can qualify for the account. And then you start by essentially getting into an electronic application process whereby they guide you through each step in terms of what information they need, how it's to be expressed or displayed, and you follow those prompts, and at the end you will have a successfully submitted Form 1. Because it's electronic, payment is via credit card, and it's essentially instantaneous. In my past experiences with paper applications, you would have a lag time between when your check was cashed by the IRS and when your application made it onto the desk of an ATF agent. And so you avoid that with an electronic process. It right now being a process only available to Form 1 applications. For those of you who are not aware, we used to be able to do Form 4s. I think we crippled the system with our excitement and all the transfers we wanted made, and so they pulled it down to revamp it. So we've only got a few of all of the available forms back, and for purposes of our discussion, the most important is the ability to electronically file a Form 1. So, some people have asked or commented about, being on a government list, and, frankly, at this point, my thought is that the government already knows who you are when you buy a gun. They already know who you are because they know what's on in your phone conversations and your texts and your emails, and for that matter, so do the Chinese and anybody else who's listening in. So really, I wouldn't say worry about it. I wouldn't say that it's anything that you're going to have come back and haunt you. If you're a good, upstanding citizen, I don't think you have a problem. At the same time, if the worst case scenarios that people that dream up are going to result in something along the lines of a major confiscation, well, I'm sure you're going to have a little more forewarning than that first knock on your door. I mean, frankly, there's not enough federal employees for everybody to show up on everybody's door and collect their guns. So, take that for what it is. Whether or not you're comfortable with the idea of basically letting the ATF know what it is you've just bought, I really think it's kind of a moot point, because if you don't do that, you don't get it. So I'd say bite the bullets and just get over that, because, frankly, you're not looking at a process that is quick and easy. So if you find yourself on the side that says, I want one, but they've stopped giving them, you don't have a choice now. And that does bring me to another point that I think is worth illustrating. It took, counting back, probably about 3 months and I'd say 20 days. So 3 2/3 months. That's a very big departure from the amount of time it took from my first SBR, which was 30 days. I don't think everybody gets a glimpse behind the curtain. I can't tell you why it takes, what is that, 90, 100, 105 days. I just don't know. But, that's what it took. Or 110 days. In any case, my thought is this. Some people are just kind of dismayed by the idea that they're going to have to wait. Well, this isn't an instant gratification kind of item. You're always going to have to wait. So my thought is that if you want one, go stand in line. Because by the time you get over you're not wanting to stand in line, the line will have grown that much longer. The fact that I stood in line, 110 days doesn't bother me. It's just part of the process. But if you don't get in line next time, it might be, 180 days. It might be 360 days. So I would urge you that if this is something that you're interested in, make the leap, pull the trigger, get it done. But the process of going through the NFA is painless. The agents that work in the, NFA division, I've never had a bad experience. I've talked to several. There's a way to get a hold of them. I've even had them reach out and ask me questions on my first SBR, clarifying an issue in terms of the caliber. And, I was really pleasantly surprised that here this ATF agent is going to call me up with my application on his desk and say, hey, here's a question I have for you so that we can get this done, rather than, oh, you know what, you messed it up, I'm going to kick it back to you and get at the end of the line, do it all over again. I think that's nice. I think it's nice that they're going to go to that degree to assist you. Now, obviously, the problem in my case was very minor. It was a question of caliber designation, and the ATF agent used his judgment and thought he could get that in an email. If you give them a bad trust, then they're going to just kick it back and make you wait in the end of the line, not because they're jerks, but because you give them a bad trust. I don't know that there's much more I can tell you about that. It is what it is. So just to kind of let you know, I don't think, in my experience, it is that big a deal to deal with the application process, to wait the amount of time it takes to get through that process, and to basically take into possession something that is regulated the way it is under the National Firearms Act. So I would encourage you to go ahead and just get out there and do it. So with that done, I think the thing I'd like to talk to you about is the build itself and some of the things that I really kind of struggled with in putting it together. And so it starts off with the premise that I'm going to put a piston system on it. I have an Adams Arms piston on it. It's a piston that I got with a I guess it was a barrel assembly, an upper receiver. That's what it was, that I got through a company that will remain nameless because their storefront closed. But it was right at the height of when things were disappearing. I was trying to build a rifle for my dad, and I couldn't find an upper receiver to save my life. I found this whole assembly with this Adams Arms piston in it, and a really kind of cruddy 1-9 barrel. Not much of a profile. It was just a very kind of archaic baseline product, but it was still a good quality Adams Arms piston. Now, I took that off, and the whole Adams Arms piston kits took on a new evolution when Adams Arms came up with their low profile gas blocks. So what I ended up doing was just buying a replacement gas block for my piston system. Now, with that in the mix, I installed it on my SBR upper receiver, which I was using with my other SBR when it was put together. And it shot nice. I ended up getting an 11.5-inch barrel, 1-7 twist, and it's a Brownells barrel. I got that so that I could have something that was a lot more manageable in terms of length in the 5.56 caliber. And I put a let's see, Saker trifecta, I believe, muzzle device, QD attachment point for my Saker suppressor. I put that on the barrel so that I could mate those two. And I put on a 12.37 inch Samson Handguard. And right after I built it and shot it, I was very pleased, but I decided I needed to get a lower receiver for it, another one. And in doing that, that basically began the process that we're going to talk about today. But what I discovered about the upper receiver I built is that I wasn't happy with the length of the handguard. And understand that low profile gas piston has an adjustment knob on it. And because that 12 plus inch handguard was riding just forward of the end of the muzzle device, I couldn't get to the adjustment knob. Now, I could stick something through the rail like a punch and, move it to any desired setting, but it's an impractical solution. And so I thought better of it and decided I needed to change it out. I went through 3 other options, and here is the difficulty when you're trying to fit systems together. Adams Arms has a list of all of the handguards that will work with their piston systems. It's a very thorough guide, and it's pretty lengthy. It takes up I think probably a good page of different items that you can handguards you can put on your rifle that are compatible. But there are some other products that were coming out that were a little more novel. Knights Armament has one that I got my hands on, and I really did enjoy the quality of their product, but it just wasn't going to fit with the piston-driven AR. I got another upper or handguard that really was not giving me the flexibility and the freedom I needed to install the handguard and then get the gas block in place and cinched down the way I needed to. And, really the frustration point I reached basically just kind of put it outside of the realm of, happiness. And so what I ended up doing is going back to a Samson, but I got a 9-inch Samson handguard. And that handguard comes just to the edge of the gas block, leaving essentially the entirety of my adjustment for the gas block right within easy reach for, manipulation whenever I need to. So, I think it goes back to something I've said before. It is important to plan your build. It's important to be flexible because you're going to have to give somewhere if your concept just isn't going to work. And so it makes some sense to do your homework, do your research, and get as much information as you can. So the Samson handguard was one that Adams put on their list of acceptable handguards that'll hold that entire assembly underneath the handguard without any difficulty. And, I have to tell you that Samson really kind of came up with a unique and I think very easy to use installation system. And I think it's probably worth going to their website and looking at some of the stuff they have if you have questions or thoughts and you want to get some more information. So what I ended up getting then is a 9-inch handguard on an 11.5-inch barrel with a Saker QD mount. And for our purposes tonight, I'm going to show you on our camera what this all looks like. So I do encourage you to head out to YouTube so that you can take a look at what this handguard and this Adams Arms gas block are going to look like when they're mated on this 11.5-inch barrel. So one of the things that I can also point out is this is a carbine length gas system, and it really does shoot very nicely. The handguard aside, it was the same barrel upper and gas system when I first test fired it, and I started off closing it down to really just kind of get a sense of what it was going to be like, and I began opening it up until I was happy with the performance of the 5.56 through a suppressor with an 11.5-inch barrel. So I got to a really comfortable place, and I enjoyed it a lot. So when it came down to the other thoughts, I think a lot of the things that I installed or put into place with my rifle are pretty much part and parcel with the things that we talked about on the podcast and with a lot of our listeners who write in, giving them advice and counsel on the things that we're pleased with and the things we're not. So, you know, I have Magpul Furniture. I got the K-grip. It being an SBR, it fits a little closer to the body, and the angle of that grip kind of takes some of the pressure off your wrist. I got the what is that? That's the ACS stock. Yeah, let me confirm that. ACS-L. It's the adaptable carbine stock, and it's the light version, so it's the new slim stuff. I really like the look and the feel of it. It's, you know, the normal Magpul quality gear. And unlike my other SBR, which I was trying to go for maximum compactness, I'm really trying to keep the lower receiver and stock and the barrel extension to a point where it's on par with what you would find on a conventional carbine, and then just keep the barrel upper receiver as short as I can, considering I'm going to put a Sager on the end. You know, in terms of the bolt carrier group, you really are limited because the bolt carrier group, when used with the piston system, has to dispense with the gas key, and so Adams Arms makes their own bolt carrier for their systems, and so you have to use that, or you have to go to some great lengths to try to convert another bolt carrier to one that can be used by their system. So I was happy to use theirs, and not worry about having to deliberate on what I was going to put in there in terms of a bolt carrier group or the bolt. You know, if I find there are some things that I can, you know, look at in terms of modification, I'll give you an update, but I really don't know that I'm going to put too much effort into modifying that existing assembly. The upper receiver, I don't know if I told you, there are spikes upper and spikes lower. Spikes make some really good quality gear. I think it's very reasonably priced. And, you know, I've always been happy with it. I have several spikes lowers. I don't know how many spikes uppers I have. I think maybe just the one. But, you know, when it comes down to it, if you find a company that you feel makes consistent parts, I don't know why you should feel compelled to, you know, stray from what you know. You know, at the end of the day, when it comes to the lowers and the uppers, aside from an aesthetic, more often than not, the design and materials technology in the upper or the lower is not going to make that much of a difference in the rifle as a whole. You know, I'm sure that the more precision you have engineered into those components, the more precise your rifle is going to be. But I think that most people would not tell you that what they need is, you know, $15,000 firearm precision. You know, they want, you know, $750 to $1,250, you know, firearm precision. So, you know, I think it's all relative in terms of what it is you're comfortable with. But I do think that most of the things that drive people to buy non-standard uppers and lowers have to do with aesthetic, and that's not wrong. I have some that I like because of the aesthetics, but I just don't want you guys to feel compelled or obligated or pressure to buy high end when really high end is not going to change your shooting experience in many ways. So yeah, I've got a spikes upper and a spikes lower, and I'm real happy with those. You know, the internals, I've got a lot of Battle Arms development gear. I have Aero Precision components. I've got I'll have to remember. Hold on. It's either a Norgren, Ambi safety selector, or it's a Troy. I think it's a Troy. In any case, I will let you know what it is rather than sitting here digging for a box letting you listen to dead air. But, you know, most of the parts I've talked about on the show before are being put in the rifle. And so I think that anybody who, you know, tries to listen often enough and catches wind of the things that I tend to be fond of and the things that I tend to push is going to know what it is I'm talking about in terms of what I put in the rifle. I am going to put one of the flat springs we talked about in the Money Well Spent episode into this rifle. And I have an enhanced buffer tube by Primary Weapon Systems that I'm going to put on this. One of the things that I think is driving that desire is that particular buffer tube is just, it eliminates some of the complaints I have with a standard buffer tube. I think principally it's that your castle nut can sometimes work loose. You know, I typically try to wrench mine down and, you know, obviously not over torque it and screw up the lower receiver, but, you know, I do try to get them, you know, tight and snug because I don't like the idea of having to stake it and find myself having to tear up metal if I want to undo what I've done. But because of the design of the PWS enhanced buffer tube, you're really not going to be required to go to those lengths. It's a very secure lockup, and it's a very attractive piece of aluminum. I think it enhances the look of the rifle, and so I'm pretty happy with that. You know, I think when it comes down to it, the biggest considerations are always going to be in terms of, you know, where your controls are going to most effectively mate with your knowledge of the rifle, of the weapon system, the manual of arms, your abilities or, you know, capabilities in terms of the rifle. Yeah, I'm left-handed, so I like to have all of my controls be ambidextrous. Because I'm left-handed and I have to have ambidextrous controls, you know, in many instances, I am faced with having to have things that are a little cumbersome. You know, the bolt catch is really kind of hard to manipulate when you're left-handed. It's not a very natural manipulation. At the same time, the safety selector has a tendency to always retain its original right-handed switch, and so every time I engage or disengage the safety, that switch is rubbing against my index finger. And, you know, with enough time, I can wear a hole in my index finger, so, you know, that's a bit of a pain, but, you know, once again, these are things that are just part and parcel to being left-handed. But, you know, if you need, you know, the bolt assist device that Magpul makes, or if you need an ambi mag release, or if you need just a big button mag release, or any of the other controls, I encourage you to get what makes sense so that you can most effectively use the rifle. And, I'm not talking about, Jerry Mikulek, speeds in the competition. I'm just talking about, being happy with what you have. Nothing like having a firearm you're just never happy with. I put on my rifle the Magpul Mbus Pro sights, and I have to tell you that I really am still so very pleased with those sights in terms of quality, in terms of ruggedness, in terms of what they've designed into the sights. I think it's a really good system. For them being metal sights, I think they are competitively priced against most other metal sights. I know there are some polymer sights that are really good. The original Mbus are still very good. So, that's just a personal preference of mine, but that's the direction I took it. In terms of other, like optics that I'm going to put on the rifle, I really don't know that at this point I'm in a position to tell you what I want or to tell you what I'm comfortable with. I think I'm going to have to spend some time in the range, and I know that I always say it, but I believe in getting comfortable with the iron sights before I do anything to change the way that the rifle is going to function. I feel that I need to know where it's going to shoot with your basic irons, before I move on to those next steps. And so that's my intent right now. Of course, I put a device on it so I could attach a Saker. The Saker I got is the 7.62. The rifle I'm building is a 5.56. The can itself is a little bigger compared to a 5.56 can of the same model. And so that allows for some more space, some more dimensions for the gases to dissipate, and it reduces the decibel level a little bit more. And so I do want to say that in terms of making a choice like that, I am more comfortable with something that is going to be a multi-use item than I am a thing that's going to be a single-use item. Rather than getting a 5.56 can that would only be valuable in the context of putting it on any 22, I didn't see that as being particularly valuable. So I got the 7.62, so basically it'll do anything below a 30 caliber projectile. And that's a pretty wide range of things that it can do. So I could theoretically shoot my 243 with a suppressor on it, which, in thinking about that, really would be kind of an interesting perspective. So I may undertake that in my free time. But the whole purpose that the rifle was to serve is to be something suppressed. And so in getting the gas system I did, the piston, I did it because I wanted to have the ability to basically dial up or dial down my gas and to control what my cycling was going to look like with and without a can, and just in terms of all the other dynamics that might be at play. Aside from the fact that its presence, eliminated my ability to use other kinds of handguards, I think that the two have mated pretty well. And, I think that I need some more time at the range after I get my rifle completed. I'll come back and give you kind of an update on how that looks. So with kind of the build considerations out of the way, I want to touch on what my next issue is, what my next portion of this project build, and that's basically a Cerakote. I know that I have probably been a little obtuse when it comes to the whole point of a black rifle, but I think I am going to spread my wings and have my rifle, this build, Cerakoted. So I talked to a fellow here. He was spoken of highly by a local gun store, and we spoke. So I'm going to drop it off, and I'm going to engage him to do the work, and we'll see where it goes from there. But basically, from my perspective, this is going out of the box, and I'm real excited to see what it's going to look like. I have some ideas. I'm not going to tell you what they are. Still in this kind of fragile state, straying from the black rifle dogma. So I don't want anybody to criticize my choices in pattern or color or anything like that. So, but I think one of the things that I'm going to have to figure out is, are there any considerations when assembling a rifle after you've put a coating like Cerakote on it? And so I haven't Cerakoted it, and I haven't put it back together, so I don't have an answer for you yet, but I am going to gather that information. I'm sure many of you have experienced it, but I think as a product of most companies that'll coat a rifle, they do the disassembly and reassembly for you. So I'm not really sure where I'm going to be on this. If any of you guys have suggestions for a pattern or color combinations, by all means, put them up on our Instagram feed, and I'd be real eager to look at what you have and kind of, see if there's anything that, I'd be willing to copy, plagiarism being the most sincerest flattery. But that's really kind of the next step here. Obviously, until I Cerakote it, I won't be able to get it assembled. The upper receiver is a fine functioning upper, but of course I still have to mate it to all of the other components in my new lower. I know that it worked in the other SBR lower, so I am comfortable with the upper receiver in its current state, but of course I have to tear it all down or have it torn down, and we'll see how it operates when I get it back together. When it comes to an SBR, I think the hardest thing for the accessory fashionista to realize is that you really, really have a shortage of real estate when you take that length off your rifle. And in doing that, in that limitation, I really don't know that there are a great many accessories that I would think to put on an SBR. So I think mine is going to be a very straight up, streamlined, basic accessorized rifle. That's going to have irons and an optic of some sort. I'm thinking perhaps a Comp M4. And I think that's going to be about it. I think a bipod is a little excessive. I think much more in the weight, in terms of the weight of laser designators or laser pointers, or the array of night vision things. The foregrips and the angled foregrips and the stops and the barricade blocks. I think really all of those have little space on an SBR. I don't see an SBR as something that is going to be benefited by much of that. the barricade blocks for the competitors. I don't know that I'm going to be competing with this. All of the other kinds of grips, frankly, the rifle is so short. I don't know that those are going to be necessarily comfortable, approachable grip options. So I'm gonna be open-minded, and I'm gonna see what I can find in the world of accessories that I might need. But I think for the most part, I'm still going to stick with a very basically appointed rifle, and stay away from a lot of the extras that we see more and more these days. So I'm real excited to get it together. I've been patient these last several months, and so I'm steeling myself to be patient just a little bit more so that I can get the rifle coated and then get it back and get it assembled. And then I think probably in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be able to get it out to the range. I do want to let you know that, JW spends a great deal of time out getting some good training and dealing with some good professionals. The difficulty when you get older and have kids is, you don't always have the free time, but I've begun to take my children out, my eldest, and that's a really nice experience. But it also is something that, I think you have to incorporate it as a discipline. The thought of going to the range as being just a part of your routine. I began probably, I'd say 6 months ago, going to the pistol range every Friday morning. It's on my way to work. It's convenient. They have a great deal. And so in that span of time with those morning sessions, I think that I've really been able to work through some of my bigger complaints about my skill level. And, I even competed in a local firing ranges open match. And I don't know whether the scoring was consistent, but out of 500 points, I scored 477 in the first match that I was in. And that was out of a field of, I think, 28. I came in number 5. And of course, the two guys I went with were 1 and 2. So I think next time I'm going to leave them at home. But, I was very pleased with my first outing. And I do believe that it's simply because I've been putting time and energy into the range that my shooting has gotten a little tighter, and that I was able to do that. But, when it comes down to shooting the AR, it's the same thing. I think you do need to dedicate some time to get out and get to know your rifle. We talk about these projects. We talk about these rifles in pretty, kind of, I don't know. We're not really considering the reality that many of us only have one, or maybe 2, but we don't have a rifle for all seasons and all occasions. And so it does pay to get out and learn what you have, train with it, and get to know it better. So I'll keep you updated as I get my build put together, and I'll put some photos up because I guess I'm going to have to admit it that I'll need to figure out what Instagram is and have JW show me so that I can give you guys some ideas of what's going on here. But I think I'm gonna wrap up tonight's show with that, and just let you know that I'm excited to get this done. I'm excited to share it with you. And if you have any questions about it, let me know. And by all means, if you have some suggestions, I would be eager to listen to every one of them. So with that, why don't we move on to a little bit of housekeeping? I want to let you know that we've been talking to a listener. His name is JD, and we're getting him up to speed, and we're going to have JD help us out on the show. He's going to basically help us lift the burden, help us lift the load, and We're gonna see what we can do to plug him in. I do want to let you know that I know several of you have put your hat in the ring. We haven't forgotten about you. Of course, with all of the details of daily living, we've got some complexities here. We're just trying to work through like everybody else. Life gets in the way, but as soon as we get all that underway, we will be back to getting all of you contacted and just kind of feeling you out for how you can help the show. And that's going to lead me to our next topic, which is the Otis Technology Giveaway. I want to let you know that the September 6th drawing winner is David Hibbler. So, David, I'm going to reach out to you and get a post to you so that we can get your address. I also want to let all of our fine listeners know that, once again, we've got another batch of all our prizes headed out, so you should be receiving those here pretty quickly. And with that, we just want to remind you that it is only because of the fine folks at Otis Technology that we have this mountain of rifle maintenance tools and cleaning kits for the AR-15 and AR-10, and we want to thank them so very much for their generosity. They tasked us with the it's not a chore, it's really kind of a pleasure. The pleasure of giving away to all of you dedicated listeners who really, step up and make this show all that it is. And so I want to ask you to watch for the special post on Facebook so you can get a chance to win some of the awesome products made by Otis Technology. And we'll be giving away a complete MSR cleaning kit in either 556 or 762 in the middle of each month up until Christmas. And when Christmas comes by, we'll give away a complete Otis Technology cleaning system to one lucky listener. So during the alternating weeks, we'll be giving away a host of Otis tools and cleaning supplies. Now, one of the listeners stopped by with a voicemail on the SpeakPipe plugin, and he asked how he could get involved with the drawing without a Facebook account. And unfortunately, Facebook right now is the only way to do that. I would encourage you, if you really want to join, to see if you have a family member, a colleague, a spouse, a sibling, a parent who's on Facebook, and have them register or enroll for the contest. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter who wins. This is open to everybody, but there's only one way to apply. So I would encourage you to see if you can find someone that that is on Facebook so that they can come on over and see about getting your hat in the ring for one of these awesome Otis Technology products. So let's see. I think it's time for us to talk about some feedback. So Jason P. wrote in. He says, I hope this is where I submit feedback for the AR-15 podcast. Well, Jason, you got it right. So he says, I would like to hear a show on building a pistol caliber SBR with the direct impingement operation. He says, have not heard of such a thing. And he says, think it is, I guess he's asking me, do I think it's impossible? He says there's a guy in Florida building them. His name is Ron, and he has a website at RMWX Stream. So RMWXTREME.com. He says, thanks for reading. Hope this show idea works for you and happens. And he says, P.S. I do enjoy your program, but would like to hear some more technical information imparted during the program, especially when talking building. I am going to reach out to Ron and see what he's doing over there at RMW Extreme. I did get a chance to go to the website, and I did look at some of his products, and, it is pretty interesting what he's got going on. To me, I wouldn't say that my understanding of engineering and ballistics and all the other components of firearms design are sufficient to understand why many of the pistol caliber ARs are direct blowback, but Ron's been able to use direct impingement, which I'm assuming uses a locking bolt. So I would like to reach out to Ron and see what he has to say about what he's come up with. So, Jason, I will do that. And as far as the technical information, we like giving the technical information, but it's hard to really know and target the things that you're interested in unless we have some guidance. And, that's where the whole idea of feedback, I think, gained its importance in our minds when we started the show. So, I encourage you to call us with your technical questions. If we can't answer it at this point, well over 2 years into the show, we have created a pretty wide net of technical experts who are essentially the movers and shakers and deep thinkers of the firearms world. And we'd be happy to, reach out to any of them to get an answer if it's something that just stumps us. So, I do want to encourage you guys to do that. So, Jason, thanks for writing in. I appreciate it. The next one is from Robert. He says, "Hi again, Reed. I've been going through the back episodes, and in episode 25, you mentioned a range near Ukiah, California, around a place called Cow Mountain. It says, do you still have the GPS coordinates? And, Robert, I'm fairly certain I do. I don't want to make any promises, but I have a couple places I can look. So he says, I'm desperate for a 400-yard range in northern California. He says, also, you and Steve mentioned some form of gun scrubber. He says, is that the one from Birchwood, Casey? I will have to go and look at the show notes or listen to the podcast and find out what that is. But so I've got 2 pieces of homework for you, Robert. He also says he needs something to clean out his gas tube since he's leaving. He's having a gas problem. Robert, I remember using very long pipe cleaners for our gas tubes in the Marine Corps. So I'm not sure what the conventional wisdom is today, but if you're having a problem with that, you can always dump some CLP in there and, run a couple of pipe cleaners in and see if that'll work for you. Let's see what else. He says that he may need his gas tube cleaned because he's using Norma 223 ammunition in his match rifle. But I don't know that would necessarily cause you that kind of a problem. But, it may very well. Well, Robert, you've given me some things to do, and I will undertake to get them done. So the last piece of feedback is from KCF. He says he's building his first AR, and he wants to shoot both 223 and 5.56 ammo. He's picked out a 223 wild barrel for this, and his question is, does he have to have a complete, let's see, he says, I have a complete bolt carrier group in 5.56. Will this also shoot the 223, or do I have to get a bolt chambered in 223? Any thoughts you have would help me out. Just learned about the podcast and enjoy it. Many thanks. So I've already responded to Casey, but, I think that this is a valid question. Obviously we all start out trying to figure out what the answers to all these questions. And, frankly, there's a whole lot of gear out there, and nobody starts out every product description with a detail of exactly what it's for, why it was designed, how it's supposed to be used. I think they take a lot of that stuff for granted. I don't know if that's always a good thing. But, here's the thing. The 223 and the 5.56, aside from some chamber differences, are essentially the same projectile in virtually every external dimension. Now, I don't want to open a can of worms. All you can of worm guys know who I'm talking to. But let's just leave it there. So for all intents and purposes, you've chosen the one barrel most people think can very easily accommodate both cartridges, both calibers, and at that point, you've got all the pieces in place that you need. Your bolt is essentially not going to be designed to shoot one or the other of those two calibers. It's going to be designed to fit in the barrel extension of your barrel, chambered for one of those two calibers, and those barrel extension and bolt dimensions don't change in any way, to the best of my knowledge. It is identical in all respects. So any bolt that you find that is going to be 223 or 556 designated is essentially the same bolt. And all of them will work in a rifle chambered for those calibers, or the other caliber, or either or both. It's going to be just the one bolt for all of those choices. Now, of course, you get into 7.62 by 39, it's a different bolt. 6.5, different bolt. All of those other non-223, non-556 calibers, they have their own bolt. But here, you're going to be safe, Casey. So I hope you enjoy your rifle when you get it all put together, and I hope we've been of some assistance to you. So, with that, guys, I think that it's time to go ahead and close the show out. I'm going to go ahead and read through the outro, and let's give you guys some opportunities to stay in touch with us. So you can send us any questions or comments to our feedback at ar15podcast.com address. You can also send us a recorded voicemail by using the SpeakPipe plugin on the right-hand side of the podcast's website. Subscribe to us and listen for free on iTunes or on Stitcher. And we always ask you to leave a review so that the show can place as high as possible in the searches of other potential listeners. Share your pictures with us at Instagram. You can hashtag us and add us at the AR15 podcast. Check us out over on Periscope at AR15 podcast. And, I think that the whole social media world has passed me. Maybe it's even lapped me, because I don't even know what Periscope is. But good thing JW does. We also invite you to follow us on Google Plus, where you can watch us live at Plus AR15 Podcast. Check us out on our YouTube page, /C/AR15 Podcast. You can follow us on Facebook, /AR15 Podcast. You see there's a recurring theme here. And you can check out all of the other great podcasts on the Firearms Radio Network. We encourage you to do so because there's really a lot of great content out there. Don't forget to use our Brownells affiliate link for all of your AR-15 parts. You can go to the link on our website or www.ar15podcast.com/parts. And use our Amazon affiliate links on the firearmsradio.tv website and the AR15podcast.com website. When it comes down to it, either of those will help us continue to bring you great content. So guys, with that, I'm going to close out. I think next week we're going to have JW back on, and we will be able to introduce you to JD. So have a great week. We look forward to seeing you again. Bye-bye.
This has been a production of the Firearms Radio Network. You can find more information at firearmsradio.tv.